Hey, welcome. I'm Joel here with my dad here.
And I'm Rick, and we're glad you're here with us today. What's up?
Malm, we're in the Malm podcast here, where we just talk about all sorts of stuff. It's February, and our focus this year is conquering mountains. And I thought for February, we would talk about relationships since it's Valentine's month. Yeah. And I wanted to talk today about a tricky one, right?
Okay.
This is interesting because I want to talk about negative influences in our lives.
Okay.
And the fact that we as Christians, we're supposed to be this light to the world, but we're also supposed to keep ourselves from being polluted by the world. So the reason this came up is I recently got called to the principal's office, which is a very familiar thing for me as a teenager.
Didn't expect it at this age, did you?
Yeah. I am on the board of this school, and my daughter's going to this school, and the principal asked me to come and be in a meeting with a girl that they were having some problems with. And as we're sitting in this meeting, I realized it was a very wild experience because I realized the reason this girl was being called into the office was for the very things I was always being called into the office for. I never did anything bad per se. I wasn't beating up on people. I was, anything like that. I wasn't doing devious things. I was always in trouble for saying something that everybody was thinking, but nobody wanted to say, and just stirring up people with my words. And so I'd get called in the principal's office. I'm like, I didn't do anything. And they'd be like, you said something. And I'm like, well, can I say something? And they'd be like, you saying things it influences people and causes them to be bad, right? So people would be like, they would see me as bad because of the things I said, but I'm like, I really at my heart, I had a really heart to serve the Lord, but and I don't know if that's the story for this girl, but it was this deja vu moment where I'm like, this is what always got me in trouble. This stuff I said.
There was the shooting paperclip incident too one time, but you don't remember that one? Yeah, there was.
All right, maybe once.
Only once I remember.
Out of the abundance of the heart. Anyway, so my thought was this. This is also a challenge I've talked to so many parents about. They say, we go to this church. This church is a very outreach-driven church, and they have this youth group that has all these horrible kids in it. And we're grateful these kids are going to a youth group, but our kids come home saying words, knowing about things we don't want them to know about. At youth group, we send them to youth group to learn about Jesus, and they come back with these bad influences. And it's a constant challenge of figuring out when you're creating a Christian environment, you have these people coming in who don't understand, Christian values, and you want to train them in it, but they can also have a very negative influence on, kids that are learning and young kids. And so what's the balance between engaging with negative influences, allowing negative influences in your life, but not being impacted by them? And as a parent, how do you protect your kids from these negative influences that may be coming in even to the church, which you think is the safe area? I know people that literally will not send their kids to youth group because they say they learn worse things from the kids in youth group than they do from their kids at school.
Yeah. I'm not sure there's a balance in that. My experience comes from a Christian education, Christian school. One of my first assignments in ministry was principal of a Christian school. And the elders of the church came to me and they said, hey, we have a non-Christian school and a Christian school. We want you to go in and change that. We want to have a Christian school. So I got a little bit of training on it, but pretty much was just sort of thrown into the river and learned to swim. But what I quickly determined was you have to determine ahead of time your youth group, your Christian school. Is it going to be evangelistically focused or is it going to be discipleship focused?
And the purists among us would say it needs to be both.
And I would say you can't do both. With kids. Now, adults, you can. But with kids, you can't. Kids are still growing. They're still being formed. They're still being shaped. It's like taking a little plant and putting it out in winter. Well, plants, they're going to have to survive in the winter and they're going to have to survive a frost. Yeah, but you don't put them out there the first year. You don't put them out there the second year. You wait until they've got good, strong roots. And kids don't have good, strong roots. And so you don't just expose them to everything. And so in a youth group, you have to determine, is this evangelistic? And we had the same thing when we first went back to Corpus Christi. Jonathan was still with us, youth group age. he didn't want to be a part of that youth group at that church there because it was evangelistic. It had a bunch of hoods in it, and it was great. The youth group leader was reaching out to them and changing them, but it wasn't a place for him. So he went to another church. I'm pastor of a church, and my son goes to another youth group. And I said, that's fine.
Yeah.
People don't like it. I'm doing what's best for my son. That's priority number one.
That's a really good point. Is I think it's good to give people permission for their kids to go to another youth group. And in some ways, maybe you need to do whatever it takes to support them, even if they're going to a church where you go, I don't really, obviously, if you don't like the teaching content, I wouldn't send them. But if it's just the teaching style or the music style, but the kids enjoy it, sometimes that's the sacrifice we need to make for a season. Say, I'm going to let my kids engage over there, or I'm going to engage over there. So we go to church as a family. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. In fact, I think, I know a pastor got in trouble for saying this, but I think you need to give up your own preferences.
Yeah.
Because a lot of churches' preferences, let's face it, we don't like, it's not marketing, it's preference. You like this kind of music, you don't like that kind of music. You like this kind of a service, you like one that's long, you like one that's short, you like one that's loud, you don't like smoke, you do like smoke. You don't like, I'm not talking about smoke.
Fog. Fog is the word.
Fog. Yeah. Smoke. Well, in some cases it might be smoke. I don't.
What are these? Some of these churches that have cigar smoking as a real hip thing. They're like, I'm free in Christ to smoke cigars. Yeah,
exactly. The freedom. So the point is, I think at that point in time, you need to give up your preferences in order to, I hate to use the term cater to your kids, but find a place that they're going to be excited about going to church, because it's like this: when you're walking, a little person walking with a big person, the adult does not expect the child to keep up with him. Right. You slow down. You take him, he's taking his little bitty steps. You slow down so that he can keep up with you. So slow it down. Do go, as long as the doctrine is good and yeah, as you said, as long as the teaching is sound and solid, then slow down. Broadening that out to being an adult, because I know a lot of very influenceable adults. I get spouses all the time. We actually talked about this in the last episode. I get spouses all the time that write me and say, if my husband could just get around the right guys, I know he could rise up. Yeah. And he says it's his friends that are bringing him down. Now, that's an interesting thing, because a lot of us, sometimes our friends have chosen us because of where we work. You just kind of go, well, these are the people I work with. I don't really like them, but here I am. I got to work with them. It's a good job or whatever. So when it comes to adults, what are you doing when you're in a situation where you've got negative influence around you? You're supposed to be that light to the world, right? And I remember when I worked at an airline, and I remember within 2-3 weeks, somebody came up to me and was like, you don't cuss, do you? And I was like, no, I don't. I try to not cuss, right? And they're like, well, why? And I was like, oh, here's my chance. It's my faith, and I believe I should watch my words, let no unwholesome talk proceed from your lips, but only that which is for edifying. And that was all I had to say. It stood out. A lot of times, that's how you be example. But then when they'd want me to go party with them or stuff, I knew how things were going to go down. Yeah. So as much as I actually enjoyed those people I worked with, they were fun people, I knew I can't get in that environment. But then they'd oftentimes say, is that because you're better than us? I'd be like, it's not because I'm better than you. First of all, I don't like that environment. I don't like smoke and drunk people slobbering all over me, right? But I just don't like that environment. But they would often say, or is it, I would feel this as literally adult peer pressure. Yeah. Well, why don't you hang out with us? It makes us get along better at work when we hang out outside of work. And I didn't know how to respond to that, other than I just don't like that environment. But deep inside me too is also like, I know that when you get in those environments, you're a little more prone to fall into things you probably shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing, or even just, what does it say? A companion of fools suffers harm. Sometimes it's like, well, I didn't do the wrong thing. Well, you're around the people doing the wrong thing, so you got scooped in with the people doing the wrong thing. And that's a really hard thing in relationships sometimes. You want to relate to people, you want to be friends, you want to, maybe even if it's your spouse. I have some friends that do a lot of marriage counseling, and they say a lot of times what happens is that one spouse is dragging the other spouse into stuff that they feel very compromised in. How do you navigate that? Being a light while also keeping yourself from being polluted by the world. That's the constant challenge. Yeah. Is that the same thing? There's no balance in it? You said for kids, there isn't. The goal is to raise up the children in the safest environment that you can,
which a lot of people would disagree with. I think a lot of homeschoolers would disagree with that. But anyways.
No, I think they would disagree with that, would agree with that. The homeschoolers are...
Oh yeah, no, they would agree with that. Yeah, in the safest environment. But my point is but also that's why homeschool kids flip out sometimes because they've never been exposed to anything other than, But
then a lot of public school kids flip out because they have been exposed to it.
Yeah, statistically,
so it's
right.
like,
yeah.
So
how do you,
there's a lot of...
Question is, how do you as an adult keep yourself from being polluted by the world, but also let your light shine in that world? You can't do that if you're not in that world.
Yeah, well, you know, my experience in that was when I was in the military and had the similar situations. You know, hey, we're gonna have a party tonight. Come go with us. You know, I did one time and it was a disaster. You know, I mean, not like I fell into sin or anything, but it was just like it was just a disaster. And so I realized that wasn't it. And I don't know if this is the right answer because I never came up with a good answer either because they're gonna put the guilt on you. What, are you better than us? But to flip that around and say, so you're wanting me to respect your lifestyle and honor that and go along with it. Would you please afford me the same courtesy, respect my lifestyle, and just respect that I just don't want to be there. And so if we can both be mutually respectful of each other, then we're going to have a great relationship, you know? So it's so easy for us to feel guilty about it. Oh, you know, maybe I should go and hang out in that, you know? And I know Jesus did. Jesus hung out with the sinners. But I don't know that he ever went to an orgy with them.
Well, you know? He got accused of partying too much.
Yeah.
But I doubt it was, like that kind of it wasn't a P. Diddy party.
To just go into their house and have dinner with them was considered blasphemous.
Yeah, that's right.
So those are the things that he did. And that's where, you can go over to somebody's house and have dinner and maybe they're going to have, you know, maybe you're totally teetotaler and you're not, you know, they may have some wine or something like that, you know, but so you can go to a certain degree, but to participate in those things, I've never found it to be very helpful.
Well, and you even see now there's some people that are getting in trouble for they went to the early part of Diddy's parties, right? And you know about all the saga going on. They went to the early part of and then they leave before all the crazy stuff went down. And you go, but they're still associated with it.
Companion of fools. So it doesn't say you'll be a fool. It doesn't say you'll become a fool. You'll just say, you may look at them and go, well, I had never behaved that way. No, you might not. But if you're hanging around with them, Proverbs says you're going to suffer harm. Maybe only to your reputation, like in that case.
Yeah.
But it may be something much worse, too.
Which harm to your reputation can really be bad.
A good name is better than gold or silver, you know.
So, So what if it's your spouse?
What that is what?
Leading you into bad stuff?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, again,
I have no frame of reference for it, but my friends that work in some really difficult marriages, they say that happens all the time. Like they've got a spouse that's trying to lead them into, you know, sexual perversion or into drugs or things like that, as, you know, and they're like, well, the bond with my spouse, I feel this need to do it. He pushes me, and that's a tricky one right there. Yeah,
it is. And I mean, again, that's where you would, you know, kind of have to stand firm, I think. And again, lovingly say, look, I'm not condemning you for the way you're going, because we're not to condemn. You know, Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world. So if he didn't come into the world to condemn the world, then certainly that's not our place to do. However, I'm going to ask you to extend the same grace and kindness to you that I'm going to give to you as to please don't do this to me.
Respecting boundaries. Yeah, which is part of love. I mean, love. I love how Scott Peck says it. He says, love is extending yourself for the sake of the other person's growth. So if what you're doing is not helping them grow, it's not love, which is like, you know, sometimes people need to face the consequences of their decision. And the most loving thing you can do is not bail them out. That's where I think it gets really tricky. But I think it's, again, this is one of those tension points. The older I get, the more I'm convinced the most challenging things in life are not problems to be solved. They're tension points to be managed. There are no solutions. There's just trade-offs. If I do this, I'm going to get this. And that's where listening to the Holy Spirit, which I feel like is our answer in everything. You have to trust that the Holy Spirit can guide you in this situation. What's the thing I need to do here for the right response to my spouse, to the people I'm hanging out with? Is maybe he's saying this time, go to that party with them. But
there's kind of a weird biblical story. I was trying to think of a biblical story. If you remember Abigail, when David and this brutish man insulted David, and David was going to come and kill him. and Abigail, his wife, goes out and stops David and speaks to him graciously and says, my husband's a adult or whatever.
1 Samuel 25.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And so she ends up saving her husband. Now he later dies, and David actually takes her as a wise woman as his wife. So here was a wise woman who wanted to please God, or at least do what was right. And she I guess you'd say would be interceded, kind of stepped in. And so I would say that's one thing you could do, would be to pray for your husband, be his representative to God. Lord God, I ask you to change my husband, or ask you to change my wife. Because that's basically what she did. She interceded to David, being a type of God the Father or Jesus. She interceded on behalf of her husband to save her husband from that. And maybe that's what it talks about in the New Testament when it says that a godly wife sanctifies an ungodly husband, which is one of those weird scriptures, but maybe that's the picture that we see with Abigail, that a godly wife can have an amazing impact on an ungodly husband, and vice versa.
Thanks for listening. Please consider sharing this with your friends on the platform of your choice. For more from Joel Malm, visit joelmalm.com. For more from Rick Malm, visit rickmalm.com. Our podcast music was produced by Alex Burleson.